That Sunday morning began with the smell of burnt coffee and a silence that felt wrong. I reached out. His side of the bed was empty. The pillow was still cool. My heart sank, but my mind had been prepared for this moment for a long time. I got up, pulled on my robe, and walked out of the bedroom in our vintage-style house on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, the place Daniel and I once called home. The note was on the fridge, held by a heart-shaped magnet I bought last year in Vermont. One sharp, messy line of ink cut through like a blade. Goodbye, I never loved you. I stared at it, feeling nothing like the sadness I expected. After 9 years of marriage, maybe all that remained was a strange sense of relief. My name is Luna Hayward. I'm 41, a forensic auditor for a major financial institution in the southeastern U.S. My job is to trace money trails and expose high-level fraud. The irony? The man I shared a bed with every night actually thought he could outsmart me. Daniel, my husband. 44 years old, used to work in investment brokerage. We met at a scholarship fundraiser for students with disabilities. He was charming, attentive, a great storyteller. I thought I'd found someone with depth, someone who shared my values. Turns out, it was all just a well-crafted mask. 3 months ago, Daniel began acting differently. He started asking questions about our retirement accounts, something he'd never shown interest in before. Then came the vague phone calls, the increasingly flimsy excuses for being away, and the way he'd quickly shut his laptop whenever I entered the room. I didn't ask, I observed. As someone trained to detect anomalies in financial records, I knew the behavioral patterns of people planning to vanish. I didn't cry. I didn't confront. I documented. Every odd receipt, every transfer to a new personal account. I kept it all. Quietly, meticulously. So when the nightmare named Daniel ended with a cheap note and an empty fridge, I didn't fall apart. I smirked. He thought he was one step ahead, but in reality, I was an entire game ahead of him. I walked to the sink, gazing through the window into the small garden, where Daniel once promised to plant lavender because I loved the scent. Promised, then forgot. Like everything else he ever said. I turned back to my phone, unsurprised by the flood of notifications. Suspicious transaction, card declined, account frozen. Daniel had launched his plan, right on schedule. I poured a glass of water, took a slow sip, then opened my laptop. The folder labeled Project Dove was still there. Inside, transaction histories, screenshots, audio recordings, even hidden camera footage I installed in our home office. In one clip, Daniel whispered into the phone, "She doesn't suspect a thing. Just follow the plan." Too bad for him. I didn't just suspect, I knew. I closed the laptop and looked around the now cold, empty house. But this time, the loneliness didn't scare me. I knew the real storm hadn't hit yet, but I was ready for it, and when it came, I'd be the one still standing. Not because I was stronger than anyone else, but because I refused to let emotion cloud the truth. And truth always leaves a trail, especially when the person behind it believes they've covered everything. I started noticing Daniel's behavior shift on a late September evening. He came home late, his clothes faintly scented with a perfume I'd never worn, and his eyes avoided mine when I asked about the meeting that supposedly ran until 10 p.m. in Raleigh. "Just a demanding new client," Daniel said, taking off his coat and disappearing into the bathroom. The excuse sounded smooth, but what caught my attention wasn't his words. It was his wristwatch. The hands were misaligned, and that watch was something he always treated with obsessive care. I didn't react, I made a note. As a forensic accountant with experience uncovering fraud in investment networks throughout the Great Lakes region, I didn't rely on guesses. I needed evidence, and Daniel was leaving too much of it behind. For the next 3 months, I kept playing the role of the dutiful wife. I cooked. I smiled politely when he said he had to make a last-minute trip to Jacksonville. But behind that facade, I documented everything. The GPS history wiped from his phone, credit card charges from a couple's resort in Charleston, and a newly opened bank account under the alias T. Donovan. The first time I saw an auto transfer from our joint account to that name, I didn't say a word. I set up transaction tracking and rerouted all notifications to a separate, encrypted inbox. With every click Daniel made, I inched closer to the truth. And the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was orchestrating a full-scale financial extraction. It started with a fake debt from a shell company called Sierra Ridge Holdings, followed by staged contract payments from my own investment account. The fake contract bore a signature from a Grant Hughes. When I traced the name, I discovered it belonged to a man who had been declared dead in Nebraska in 2006. I wasn't sleeping much during that time, but I wasn't tired. Each night, while Daniel claimed to be meeting with investors in Charlotte, I sat alone in my office, in front of a wall covered in notes and flowcharts. It was a mosaic built from hundreds of loose fragments. Hotel invoices, security cam stills, bank statements, and even a voice recording of Daniel whispering to someone. "She's too buried in work to notice. Give it 2 more weeks, and it's done." One time, I faked a business trip for 3 days. In reality, I stayed in Asheville and hired a tech team to quietly extract files from Daniel's laptop using internal surveillance software. Risky, yes, but I had to be sure. I wasn't just a victim. I was running this game now. And I was right. The data revealed Daniel wasn't just draining my assets. He was leveraging my professional background to create a false identity, using it to pitch a fake investment fund called Echelon North Capital to wealthy prospects. According to the sleek website he built, the fund was actively raising over $1.8 million from private investors. My stomach turned when I saw my name listed as the chief financial officer overseeing fund security. It was all fake, every word, every credential, yet so expertly crafted that no average investor would ever question it. That was when it hit me. Daniel didn't just want my money. He wanted my name, my reputation, the 20 years I'd spent building credibility. He planned to use it as a launch pad for his biggest con yet. And when it all collapsed, I would be the one left holding the blame. I shut the screen and sat in the dark. I'd exposed hundreds of fraud schemes in my career, never once hesitating. But this time, it felt different. This time, I wasn't watching from the outside. I was inside the story, its main character, and its primary target. I took action right after Daniel withdrew from our joint account for the 4th time in 2 weeks. It wasn't the amount, just about $6,200. But the look in his eyes when I asked as gently as I could, "Did you remember to pay the property tax yesterday?" Daniel didn't lie. He smiled, took my hand, and said, "Don't worry, it's all taken care of." That exact "don't worry" made me shut down our entire financial system within 48 hours. I hired a private attorney, Helen Cross, 58 years old, a specialist in marital asset fraud. We met on a rainy morning at her office in West Durham. I handed her everything, a full flowchart of the money trail, account listings, forged transactions, and an encrypted drive containing all of Daniel's audio recordings. She didn't say a word for the first 30 minutes, only flipping pages and marking them in red ink. "You know this isn't just a divorce, right?" she finally said, lifting her eyes, sharp as surgical light. "I don't want him in prison out of revenge," I replied. "But I won't be anyone's victim." "Then let's begin." We broke the plan into 3 phases: asset relocation, access lockdown, and strategic misdirection. I moved all funds from our joint account into a single beneficiary trust in my name, structured legally and signed before our marriage. Over $230,000 in long-term investments, retirement savings, and consulting income was now beyond Daniel's reach. Next, I instructed the bank to restrict transactions from unauthorized devices. Every password was changed, biometric locks were activated, and all alerts were routed to a secure account only I controlled. Phase 3 was the one I anticipated most. I left just enough money, about $4,800 in the old account so Daniel would believe he still had a lifeline. I didn't cut off the credit cards right away, letting him think I was still clueless. Every move he made was logged. Early Tuesday morning, while working late on the second floor of my office, an undisturbed corner after 7 p.m., the notifications started pinging across my screen. Withdrawal request. Account 149 failed. Transfer of $3,000 decline. Card deactivated due to security breach threshold exceeded. I took a sip of coffee. The evening was still damp from rain. Daniel was scrambling, just as I'd predicted, and with every attempt he pulled the rope tighter around his own neck. What I didn't expect was the phone call from an unfamiliar woman at 10:07 that night. "My name is Kendra Lane. I'm sorry, but are you Daniel Hayward's wife?" I gripped the phone tighter. I was. The legal definition depends on the lawyer. My husband too. Since 2018, we live in Savannah. And I think I've been conned. I stood from my desk, a chill racing up my spine. Daniel had never mentioned Savannah. Kendra spoke quickly, her voice shaking between panic and fury. Daniel had lived two separate lives, one in Asheville, one in Savannah, with two identities, two careers, and two financial ecosystems. They had a shared account where she'd transferred over $90,000 over 3 years to invest in a real estate startup. I was speechless, but deep in my chest, something cold and metallic slammed into place. When I asked how she found me, Kendra hesitated, then said, "He left this morning, no warning. I found your number on an old phone bill listed under emergency contact. Is he still going by Daniel?" "Oh, here he's Michael Lane." I stared at the wedding photo hanging in the corner of the room. The man in that frame, that familiar smile, had never existed. I took a long breath. "Kendra, would you be willing to work with me? Because I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg." She paused for a few seconds, then said a sentence I'll never forget. "I'm not just willing to help, I want to destroy him." 3 days after Kendra's call, I sat in Helen's office, facing a whiteboard filled with red lines and names that tangled like a spider's web. We were reconstructing the full profile of the man I had once called my husband. Helen had brought in a private investigator named Marcus Hale, a retired FBI agent, 63 years old, wiry frame, thin glasses, and a memory so sharp it could split steel. That morning, when I walked into the meeting room, Marcus greeted me with a single sentence. "Luna, you're not the first, but you damn well might be the last." He laid a thick folder on the table, divided into 3 sections: false identities, marriage records, and suspicious financial activity. I flipped to the first page. A photo of Daniel, or more accurately, Caleb D. Hart, standing beside a brunette woman in front of an office building in Austin, Texas. Her name was Monica Reed, 38 years old, founder of a medtech startup recently acquired for close to $12 million. Caleb Daniel had been her emotional support husband for 3 years before vanishing with nearly $300,000 from one of her subsidiary business accounts. "She went to the police," Marcus explained, "but there wasn't enough to prosecute. He wiped everything, moved the money through crypto wallets, and drained it clean." Before I could respond, Marcus flipped to the next case, a beachside wedding photo from Tampa, Florida. Daniel in a white tuxedo, holding hands with an older, powerful-looking woman. The caption read, "Judith Lambert, 55, CFO of Gulf Shore Energy." Less than 8 months later, Ms. Lambert was diagnosed with temporary cognitive impairment due to neurological complications. During that window, Daniel, under the name Reed Morrison, gained financial power of attorney and emptied her retirement fund. I clenched my jaw. My pulse thudded in my ears. Judith. Monica. Kendra. Me. Each one a calculated piece of an elaborate, chilling scheme. Marcus pulled up a digital map of the United States. Red pins marked a jagged trail from Georgia to Colorado, looping back through Nevada. Each pin represented a place Daniel had lived under a different identity. No name repeated. But one pattern emerged clearly. He targeted accomplished, independent women, often in finance, law, or tech, women with success, women too busy to suspect. We've verified at least 11 confirmed aliases, Marcus said steadily. 7 reported cases, 3 under active investigation and 1 in Santa Fe. Never reported because the victim went missing shortly after he left. My brow furrowed. You mean? No solid proof, Marcus replied. But after Daniel, or more accurately, Elliot Graves, left Santa Fe, a woman named Veronica Dale vanished without a trace. Her family assumed she fled to Mexico, but Border Patrol has no record of her crossing. A chill rippled down my back. It took me several seconds to steady my breathing. Then Marcus hit me with the detail that nearly knocked me out of my chair. He's building a new investment firm in Chicago. It's called Halstead Equity. Filing was submitted 6 weeks ago. Chief Financial Officer listed on the documents. He paused. Luna Hayward. I snapped my head toward Helen. He's using my name and a fake LinkedIn, doctored headshots, even a cloned email address, Helen added grimly. He's created a second Luna, polished and credible enough to attract high net worth investors. Helen grabbed my hand, firm and urgent. If we don't stop him now, he'll pull you into a multi-million-dollar fraud ring, and when it crashes, you'll be named as a co-conspirator. I sat frozen, thoughts spinning. I thought I'd planned everything, every angle, every move, but Daniel, Caleb, Elliot, or whatever other name he used, had pushed it further than I imagined. I turned to Marcus. Do we have enough to bring him in? He nodded once. Almost, but not enough to make it airtight. I inhaled deeply. Then I'll give him a trap, one he'll never see coming. Helen gave me a small smile. You sure you're ready for that? I met her gaze, my voice cold and steady. I don't just want to catch him. I want the world to see exactly who he is. After I discovered that Daniel wasn't just a con man in my life, but a predator who had deceived many other women, I realized I couldn't do this alone. The deeper I dug into his past, the more I saw the terrifying pattern of manipulation. I was likely one of the last in a string of victims spanning over a decade. I began quietly searching for his previous targets. After weeks of discreet calls and patient persistence, I finally connected with Rachel, a woman he had scammed in a case out of Phoenix. Rachel, 43, was a successful stock investor. She had founded and led a boutique financial firm before she met Daniel, at an investor mixer, of course. They hit it off fast and were married within a year, but just 3 months later, when Rachel started questioning irregularities in their joint accounts, Daniel vanished, taking her entire fortune and leaving her in debt and heartbreak. During our first call, Rachel was guarded, her voice cold with years of disappointment. But as I shared what I'd uncovered, his aliases, his frauds, and the list of victims, she slowly opened up. And soon, we agreed. We wouldn't just talk, we'd fight back. Together. That day, Rachel and I met at a small cafe on the outskirts of Chicago, where I'd arranged a briefing with Marcus, our lead investigator. The image of Daniel was fresh in my mind, that confident smirk, that false warmth I once mistook for love. Rachel sat across from me, her hands trembling slightly as she held her coffee, but her eyes were steady, burning with resolve. "Luna," she said, voice low, "I've waited a long time for this day. I can't let him hurt anyone else." She set her cup down carefully. He took everything from me. But if helping the FBI catch him means I wasn't just some random target, I'll do whatever it takes. We're not just helping the FBI, I told her firmly. We're going to make sure he pays for what he's done. We spent hours trading intel. Account numbers, email threads, phone logs, patterns. Marcus listened closely, mapping out Daniel's moves and habits. Together, we built a detailed plan. Marcus would coordinate surveillance with the FBI. Rachel and I would bait the trap. We'd use the trust he built with us to lead him into it. A week later, right on cue, Daniel reached out. His message was exactly what I expected. False regret wrapped in manipulation. "Luna," he wrote, "I made a mistake. I want to make things right. Please, I need your help." His arrogance was intact, but I had no intention of being pulled back into his lies. I didn't want closure. I wanted to end this for good. "Meet me this afternoon," I replied. "Maybe we can figure something out." That afternoon, we were ready. Rachel and I sat together at another cafe. Different location, different setup. FBI agents were stationed discreetly outside. Marcus monitored the feed from a van a block away. Rachel adjusted the button camera in her coat. I checked the recording device embedded in my clutch. We reviewed the final details one last time. When Daniel arrived, everything would move fast. One mistake and he could slip away. Daniel sat across from me in a vintage-style cafe nestled in the quiet commercial district of Evanston, Illinois. The soft lighting highlighted the same confident smile that had once deceived so many. But this time his eyes darted restlessly, and a pleading tone crept beneath his calm facade. "Una, I know I made mistakes. I just need one more chance. Just a little capital from our backup account. You still have the password, right?" I pretended to hesitate, lowering my eyes as if I were conflicted. He thought his elaborate act was working. What he didn't know was that every word was being recorded by the mic sewn into the buttonhole of my coat. From my bag, I pulled out a silver USB drive and placed it on the table. "This has the full data on my old accounts, and the trust fund details you asked about," I whispered. His eyes lit up. "All I ask is that you don't come back," I continued. "No calls, no messages, no more looking for me." "I swear," Daniel said almost reflexively, already reaching for the USB. The moment his fingers touched it, two plainclothes agents stepped forward, badges in hand. "Daniel Blake Hayward," one of them said firmly. "You're under arrest for federal fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit interstate financial crimes." Daniel froze. That signature smirk vanished. He tried to pull his hand back, but it was too late. The metallic snap of handcuffs closed around his wrists in seconds. I stood, retrieved the USB comm, completely empty except for blank files and a redirect to the FBI's secure evidence server. As they led Daniel away, he turned and looked at me. For the first time, his eyes showed nothing but fear. I met his gaze with silence. Not triumph, but finality. With Daniel in custody, phase 2 of our plan began. In a rented apartment in the suburbs of Aurora, Kendra, the second wife, was playing a critical role. We had predicted that once Daniel was arrested, his accomplices would attempt to access the remnants of his operation to cover their tracks or retrieve any remaining assets. Right on cue, that night, suspicious activity pinged from an IP address previously linked to Daniel's offshore transfers, originating from the exact apartment Kendra was using as our sting location. Through the hidden surveillance feed, we watched as a neatly dressed blonde woman entered with a spare key. She didn't hesitate. She pulled a laptop from her bag, connected to the network, and began logging into encrypted accounts. It was Hannah Price, the woman Daniel once introduced to me as his cousin in real estate. She wasn't alone. 10 minutes later, a bulky man with silver hair and wireless earbuds stepped in. Gavin Foster, the convicted hacker who once breached a banking system in Las Vegas back in 2016. He was the tech brain behind Daniel's clean getaways. As the two began working, the FBI strike team waited outside, already stationed in 2 blind spots around the building. Kendra, seated in the bedroom, pretending to talk on the phone, whispered into her lapel mic. "Birds are in the nest, 2 subjects, 1 laptop, 1 external drive." 15 seconds later, the signal was sent. The door burst open. "FBI, hands in the air, do not move." Gavin jumped, bolting toward the back exit, but was taken down instantly. Hannah screamed, flailing, but there was nowhere to run. I watched the whole scene unfold on a monitor inside the FBI's temporary command center a few blocks away. Part of me exhaled in relief, the other part waited, needing to be sure that everyone complicit was finally exposed. Helen, my attorney, entered the room, carrying a thick folder. Hannah's last attempted transaction was to a Caribbean hedge fund account. But she couldn't get past the second encryption layer. The system blocked it completely. I nodded, eyes still on the screen. So now all 3 are in custody. and none of them realized it was the victims who cornered them. Helen smirked. Smart women are always underestimated, until it's too late. I sat in silence, breathing slowly, as the glow of the interrogation room washed over the faces of three people who once believed they were untouchable, now with nowhere left to hide. 2 months after Daniel, Hannah, and Gavin were arrested, I was invited to a closed-door meeting at FBI headquarters in Chicago. The room was dimly lit, the large screen at the front displaying the words, Operation Silk Spider, International Fraud Network Briefing. FBI agent Rebecca Mallory stood before a dense data board, pointing at a digital map stretching across North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia. Her voice was firm, emotionless, but each word struck like a gavel, delivering a sentence. Daniel Blake Hayward, or more accurately, Caleb Hart, Elliot Graves, Michael Lane, and at least 41 other aliases, wasn't just a solo con artist. He was the central node in a transnational financial fraud network. The room went silent. For 12 years, this group targeted highly educated women, especially those in finance, law, and tech. Most were single or recently divorced with independent wealth and limited personal networks. Daniel was the opener. He built trust, then funneled them into fake investment schemes. Rebecca tapped a button. Dozens of faces appeared on the screen, each one a victim, each name a story of loss. We've confirmed 23 victims across 3 countries, the United States, Canada, and New Zealand. Total stolen over 18 million US dollars. At least 7 more identities are still being verified. I froze when I recognized one of the photos. Grace Tully, my old college friend from Minnesota. She'd disappeared from social media years ago. I had assumed she simply wanted privacy, but Daniel had reached her too, this time under the name James Holloway, posing as a strategy consultant in Toronto. Rebecca continued, Thanks to the data provided by you and Kendra, we've traced a series of money laundering operations through shell companies in Belize, Malta, and Singapore. The names on the documents, all victims, unaware. Their identities were used to create firms, receive transfers, then left with hundreds of thousands in debt. My hands clenched. If I hadn't caught on when I did, I could have been one of those names, dragged unknowingly into a criminal operation. With the scale and structure of this network, Rebecca concluded, the Bureau is recommending the maximum sentence permissible by federal law. A week later, the official trial was held at the U.S. District Court in Illinois. The courtroom was packed. Press lined the hallways. But inside, there was no drama, no emotional showdown, only pages of indictments and heavy silence as each witness testified, each piece of evidence displayed. I sat with Kendra and Rachel. None of us spoke throughout the morning. But each time a woman exited the courtroom with tearful eyes, I felt something lift. We were not alone. After 3 days of deliberation, the federal prosecutor read the verdict. Defendant Daniel Blake Hayward, for crimes of large-scale financial fraud, identity theft, international conspiracy, and use of false identity for the purpose of deception, is hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without parole and ordered to pay nearly $9 million in restitution. Daniel lowered his head. He didn't glance in my direction. No smirk, no excuse, just silence. Hannah Price, for her role in fabricating identities and bank accounts, received 12 years. Gavin Foster, the digital operator with a prior record, was sentenced to 18 years for his central role in the tech side of the fraud ring. The court adjourned after more than 6 hours. As we stepped through the glass doors, spring sunlight flooded the marble steps. Kendra stood beside me and whispered, We just slammed shut the last door on him. I nodded, but inside me there was still something unfinished. A purpose far beyond revenge. To stop the next Daniel, the ones still out there, hiding behind perfect smiles and polished credentials, targeting independent women like I once was. And I knew my journey was only beginning. 6 months after the trial, I stood behind the podium at the FBI Midwest Division's main conference hall. Behind me, the slide read, Psychological Reflex Patterns in Romance-Based Financial Fraud. In the audience sat nearly 120 agents, cybersecurity experts, and victim advocacy leaders from across the country. I was no longer Luna, the 41-year-old woman stripped bare by the man she once called husband. Now I was a lead advisor to the FBI's special unit for emotionally manipulative financial fraud. I didn't wake up in panic anymore. I woke up with purpose. The first thing I did after Daniel's sentencing was launch Athena Network, a support alliance for women defrauded by predators like him, named after the goddess of wisdom and strategy, because we weren't just healing, we were fighting back. Every week, my team and I held free legal clinics with more than 30 volunteer attorneys across multiple states. We educated women on early warning signs in financial relationships, distributed protection resources, and provided emotional and legal recovery guidance. Rachel, Daniel's fifth wife, now served as Athena's director of communications. She hosted online forums where survivors could speak freely without shame. Kendra led regional peer groups, allowing victims to connect with women who'd been in their exact shoes. One of our first cases was Claire, a 29-year-old bank employee in Indianapolis. She'd been manipulated by someone claiming to be a real estate consultant from Dallas. He turned out to be a former member of Daniel's fraud network, now freelancing with sharper, more refined tactics. Working alongside the FBI, we uncovered his real identity, traced the stolen funds, and helped Claire recover the majority of her losses. That case didn't just save Claire, it opened the door to a new set of anonymous scammers, mimicking Daniel's playbook. I was soon invited to join a federal advisory task force, consulting directly with agents on cases involving emotional exploitation in digital spaces. In each debrief, I broke down how con men use guilt, false vulnerability, and emotional scripts to bypass victims' defenses. The very things I once saw as weaknesses became my tools for detection and strategy. I still remember one night in December. Lillian, a woman from Vancouver, called me in a whisper. Her fiancé had vanished, taking every dollar from the down payment on their new condo. She didn't even know where to start. I asked one simple question. Did he ever make you feel guilty for doubting him? There was a long pause. Then she broke down. I thought I was just being overly sensitive. No, I told her, you were right, and from now on, you're not alone. That night, my team and I worked until nearly 2 a.m., rebuilding her financial profile and following the trail. When we traced the last wire transfer to a bank in Belize, we all exhaled. A week later, the man was arrested at the airport en route to Madrid. That case reminded me, no one thinks they'll be a victim until it all collapses. But with clarity and the right support, anyone can survive. And more than that, fight back. I don't live in bitterness. I don't need Daniel to know I rebuilt this life. He'll sit behind bars for years, surrounded by names that used to be just targets in his con. Me? I move forward. My new apartment overlooks Lake Michigan, the windows wide and clear. Each morning, I brew a cup of coffee, open my laptop, and read messages from the women we've helped. One of them once wrote, I thought I'd lost everything, but thanks to you, I found myself again. I smiled, and I thought, they used to see me as an easy mark, but I became what they never expected, a predator. Luna's story proves that even after brutal betrayal and devastating financial loss, a woman can rise, transform pain into power, and pursue justice with unwavering resolve. Instead of breaking down, she chose to fight back. Not just to protect herself, but to shield others from the same trap. In real life, countless women like Luna are quietly driving meaningful change, showing that justice isn't only delivered through the law, but also through courage and intelligence. What do you think about Luna's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and emotional stories about life and family relationships.